So will future comic book fans care about Stan Lee? How many current Marvel fans know who Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko are? Is Stan Lee even considered a comic book icon anymore, or is all his praise solely absorbed within the MCU movie regime? Stan Lee is arguably the most recognised name, or maybe even face within comic book history. Actually, before we continue, let's pause right there and note. Let me first acknowledge that we could argue about the rights and the ownership of Marvel characters between Lee Kirby and Ditko till we're blue in the face, but that is not what this particular video is about. We can and we will come back to this at a later date. Stan Lee, whether you agree or not, is arguably one of the greatest writers of all time. Stan didn't just create characters or even simply tell stories, he created universes. Despite being a businessman for most of his life, Lee was also a showman, probably the greatest showman, and he didn't like the audience hating him. So he had a habit from time to time of blaming others around him when things went wrong. A good example of this is Stan backtracking on his approval to kill off Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 121. Stan had actually given his go-ahead to the writers to kill off the character, only to deny it when fans uproared. Honestly, he really wasn't a fan of being disliked. Stan entered the comic book industry at the age of 17 and, contrary to popular belief, didn't start out as a writer. In fact, teenage Stan was actually tasked with doing odd jobs around the office, sweeping floors, emptying ashtrays, making the coffee, and sometimes, on a rare occasion, proofreading. In fact, the biggest misconception people have is that Stan created Marvel itself, and that's just not the case. The company was actually started by his cousin's husband, Martin Goodman. This company originally started out as New Stan Publications, which published books of all genres. In fact, the company only became focused on comics after the success of Marvel Comics issue number 1, which introduced the world to the now classic characters Namor the Submariner and the original Human Torch. It was only after this success that the New Stan Publications rebranded their name to Timely Comics, and so forth until they landed on Marvel. Stan got his first chance to write at the company with a short story within Captain America Comics, a character Stan did not create, but still lives at the House of Marvel to this day. At the age of 18, Stan was promoted to editor at Timely Comics after two of their creators, Jack Kirby and Joe Simon, were fired from the company. They had been fired because they had been caught moonlighting at their competitor, National Comics, a company that would later go on to become DC. Over the years, it has been indicated that maybe it was Stan that ratted them out in order to secure his own position higher within the ranks, although he has of course denied this repeatedly. Now, I'm not too sure how many new Marvel fans actually know this, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but Stan Lee's real name was actually Stanley Martin Lieber. He used his pen name Stan Lee when working at Timely Comics, which again would later become Marvel, as he wanted to save his real name for when he became a more serious writer. And as we now know, this didn't actually work out the way he originally thought, and he had his name legally changed to Stan Lee in the mid-70s. Despite Stan Lee being his most popular pen name, this wasn't the only name that Stan wrote under. At the time, he wanted the company to appear a lot bigger and more successful than it actually was, and so he wrote under several other aliases from time to time. These include, but are not limited to, Neil Natz, S.T. Anley, and Stan Martin. As time went on and the years passed, comic readers got to know Stan. We were given a look behind the curtain, a glimpse behind the scenes at who he was and what he believed in. This was all thanks to Stan's letter page titled Stan's Soapbox. Now, it's important to stress here that Stan was extremely progressive for his time, and Stan's Soapbox was often used to promote diversity to its readers. In 1972, Roy Thomas took over from Stan as the head of Marvel, and from then until 2005 presented each comic book with a large banner declaring Stan Lee Presents, even though Stan had absolutely nothing to do with any of these books. The years passed, and then came the movies, and boy, Stan was in a lot of them. But contrary to popular belief, Stan hasn't been in all of them, and these cameos were not part of any long-standing deal or contract, and he didn't get paid to do them. He did them because he simply wanted to. Stan loved Hollywood. Over the years, even after Marvel was sold to Disney, Stan became something of a mascot to Marvel. He travelled around the world telling stories and promoting the company, again, all for free. He was not employed by Disney to do this and never saw a penny outside of his own dealings with the event organisers. He really was just something special. The years went on, and in the final months of 2018, Stan Lee sadly passed away, and on that day it felt like all of us lost a grandparent. Stan was a larger-than-life character whom we all cherished, and he has been missed by us fans ever since. I admit that after Stan's death I did worry about what would happen to his legacy, particularly with Disney now owning the rights to Marvel and their massive juggernaut success that was the MCU. I had originally thought that maybe they would try and sweep Stan under the rug, ignoring the years of work that he put into the company, in an attempt to simply house Marvel underneath their corporate umbrella. But thankfully that seems not to be the case. Instead, Disney has continued to praise Stan, standing him up alongside their own legendary creator Walt Disney. And on what would have been Stan's birthday this year, they even announced that we were going to be getting a Stan Lee documentary on their streaming service, Disney+. Now it may be true that in the generations to come, most might not know who this strange man is, or why he keeps showing up within every single movie of the first 3 phases of the MCU. But with Disney still supporting this great man's legacy, hopefully the information will be on hand to help educate them. Thanks for watching.